She had no right to touch it. I said it before I even stepped onto the porch, the compliance notice already fluttering in the breeze. Lorraine Withers stood 2 feet from my wife's oxygen monitor, arms folded, smug, like she'd just rearranged patio furniture instead of nearly killing someone. "It violates exterior uniformity," she said, without looking at me. If you've ever felt that surge of power when standing up to bullies, hit subscribe now. This showdown is about to become a masterclass in fighting back. Because the device she unplugged wasn't just a box, it was Emily's lifeline. And the only reason she's breathing right now is because I wrote the firmware it runs on. Every second it's offline, my wife's vitals drop, and Lorraine yanked the plug like it was a Halloween decoration. She doesn't know who I am. Not really. I don't brag about certifications, or the fact that half the Fortune 500 surveillance systems run on architecture I designed. I don't mention that the planter on our lawn isn't just decorative, it's an encrypted IP hub, streaming every angle of our property in real time. What I protect isn't just ours. It's sacred. My name is Gavin Miles, and I swore after my father died in that nursing home, unseen, unheard, that no one I loved would ever suffer because someone else didn't see the harm. And yet, here I was, watching my pregnant wife being loaded into an ambulance because an HOA president decided aesthetics mattered more than oxygen saturation. The equipment Lorraine unplugged wasn't some DIY monstrosity. It was a hospital-issued telemetry monitor, calibrated to detect subtle shifts in fetal heart rhythm and maternal blood pressure. The antenna she deemed non-conforming was part of an FDA-cleared network relay. We weren't breaking a rule, we were fighting for every safe breath. I'd already filed the exemption paperwork, twice, faxed once, certified mail the second time, all documented, all ignored. Lorraine Withers wasn't just playing by some outdated rulebook, she was inventing chapters to justify cruelty. She didn't knock, didn't call. She used her board-issued override key to let herself in. Said she was responding to an unreported installation. And now my wife was unconscious. The monitor flatlined minutes before the emergency alert triggered. If the secondary system hadn't kicked in, if I hadn't layered redundancies beneath the baseboard router, Emily and the baby might have. No, I can't finish that thought. I pulled the notice off the door. Lorraine had signed it herself, her initials under a photo of the antenna, cropped to exclude the medical tag zip-tied to its base. Below that, remove immediately or face fines. The timestamp was 4:47 p.m. Emily collapsed at 4:53. 6 minutes. That's what this was really about. 6 minutes of ego, unchecked power, and the kind of suburban god complex that turns HOA boardrooms into kangaroo courts. The EMTs didn't ask questions. They just worked. I followed behind in my truck, running silent diagnostics on the footage from the planter hub. Every step she took, every click of the switch, all captured, time-stamped, synced with monitor logs. Lorraine was about to learn something very old school about me, something I inherited from my father. When you spend your life fixing systems others barely understand, you get very good at knowing when something's about to fail. She failed, not just morally, but structurally, because this wasn't going to end with an apology. It was going to unravel every abuse she ever justified in the name of order. I pulled into the ER bay behind the ambulance. A nurse met me at the doors. Her tone was calm, but her eyes gave it away. The baby's heartbeat had dipped dangerously. Emily was stable now, but barely. I nodded, thanked her, and walked into the waiting area like I wasn't already planning a controlled demolition. If the board wanted a war over equipment, they just triggered a full-scale audit, not just of bylaws, but of access logs, override codes, emergency preparedness failures. Every HOA action that ever skirted legal review. Every complaint dismissed as non-actionable. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to post. I was going to do what I do best. Record, prove, submit. And this time, the oversight wouldn't come from a committee. It would come from the state. Where are you watching from? Because by the time we're done, your HOA might want to pay attention too. The ambulance lights faded down the ridge, but their echo stayed with me, reflected in every polished window of Sundale Ridge Preserve. By morning, the notice Lorraine taped to our front door had been replaced by a second one. This time, it was folded neatly in a plastic sleeve, sealed with the HOA crest in blue. Final warning, unauthorized equipment violation. No reference to the medical exemption I'd submitted. No acknowledgement of the emergency response. Just the same robotic tone. Comply or be fined. The HOA wasn't backing down. They were doubling down. I stepped back and scanned the other houses. That's when I noticed something I hadn't before. How quiet it was. No kids playing in the street. No dog walkers. Just the occasional whisper of sprinklers kicking on. Artificial and controlled, like everything else here. Across the cul-de-sac, the Harveys had their garage door open. I nodded. Mark Harvey nodded back, the way soldiers do when they've both survived something the neighborhood prefers not to discuss. "You got a notice too?" I asked, stepping into his driveway. He glanced over his shoulder, lowered his voice. "About our ramp?" "Lisa's still in a chair post-surgery, but they said it's a permanent structural alteration, not in line with elevation standards. I told them it was temporary. They didn't care. I looked at the ramp, short, sturdy, well-made. No. Hazard, but it interrupted the pristine symmetry of the Harvey facade, which, in Lorraine's world, was worse than a trip hazard. "I can't fight them," Mark said, rubbing his jaw. "They've got rules for everything." "They think that makes them immune," I said. "It doesn't." Mark didn't argue. He just nodded again and rolled the door down behind him. The HOA wasn't acting rogue. They were acting exactly how they were designed to. Slow, silent erosion dressed up as order. I walked past the clubhouse later that afternoon. On the bulletin board, a gallery of shame. Photos of planters too large, trash cans left visible, a child's chalk drawing on a driveway. Each image tagged with a name, a violation code, and a pending fine. And then I saw it. A photo of our front porch, taken from the street, zoomed in, angled upward. The caption read, "Unauthorized hardware, roofline relay, level 2, violation." Dated the same day Emily collapsed, so this wasn't impulsive. It was documented, planned, staged as if we were criminals airing out contraband. I took out my phone and checked the timestamps again. The photo was logged at 4:44 p.m. Lorraine entered the house at 4:46. The monitor went dark at 4:47. The ambulance was called at 4:53. I'd been looking at it through the lens of rage. Now I saw something colder. She didn't act out of frustration. She acted out of premeditation. I went home and reviewed the Planter Hub footage again. Lorraine didn't hesitate. She didn't knock, didn't wait, didn't call the board or alert safety officers. She walked with purpose, checked the porch once, then went around the side, out of the camera's frame for 27 seconds, and reappeared near the window where the exterior sensor connects. That's where she cut the power. That's when everything stopped. This wasn't about rules. It was about control, image, power. And I wasn't the first target. I started asking quiet questions that night. No flyers, no neighborhood apps, just knocks on doors I knew had been fined for things that didn't make sense. Mrs. Trejo's tomato planters, Mr. Gillespie's weather station, the Henrys' emergency lighting after their daughter's epileptic seizure. Every one of them felt alone. Every one of them had let it go, because the HOA board made fighting feel futile. But I wasn't just another neighbor. I kept records, logs, footage, and I knew exactly what digital pressure felt like when it cracked a system wide open. Lorraine Withers had built a kingdom on silence, but now she'd pulled the wrong plug, because the moment she touched that monitor, she stepped into my world. And in my world, everything is recorded. The next board meeting was held in the Sundale Ridge Community Rec Room, a windowless, echo-prone space that smelled faintly of overwaxed floors and expired coffee. Plastic chairs lined the wall. A folding table at the front held a stack of violation notices, color-coded and bound with rubber bands. Lorraine Withers stood behind the table like a judge awaiting trial she'd already decided. I didn't sit. I leaned against the back wall, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the man seated just to Lorraine's left. Marcus Kelt, HOA secretary. Tan corduroy blazer, wire-frame glasses, and a pen he kept clicking even when nothing was being written. I'd never spoken to him directly before, but I knew who he was. Everyone did. He took the minutes, ran the vote counts, balanced the bylaws, and from what I'd gathered, kept to himself. But something was different tonight. Lorraine was droning on about a proposal to enforce uniform mailbox dimensions. I was only half listening. My attention stayed on Marcus. The pen stopped. He stared down at a document that Lorraine passed him, lips pressed tight, then blinked once, slowly, and set the pen aside. When Lorraine moved on to public complaints, I stepped forward. She barely looked up. "Your 3-minute start now," she said, tapping her phone like a courtroom timer. "I'd like to address the incident from Friday," I began. She raised an eyebrow, feigned confusion. "Please be more specific. We handle many issues." "My wife's medical equipment was unplugged during an unauthorized entry into our home," I said. "She was hospitalized." The room went still. "That equipment is protected under federal ADA provisions," I continued. "I submitted paperwork documenting this. You responded with a fine notice." Lorraine didn't flinch. "This board acted in accordance with Section 4.3 of the Aesthetic Enforcement Clause, which allows emergency inspection of unauthorized modifications." "There was no emergency," I cut in, "and you had no legal standing to define one." Marcus shifted in his chair. Subtle, but I saw it. A muscle in his jaw twitched. His hands folded a little tighter. Lorraine gave a tight-lipped smile. "If you believe a violation occurred, you are welcome to submit a formal challenge, which this board will review." "Who approved your entry into my home?" I asked, louder now. She hesitated. "As board president, I'm authorized to act in cases where—" "That's not an answer." I wasn't shouting. I didn't have to. I was building tension like a closed circuit, just waiting for the spark. But Marcus, he looked like he was already on fire. I saw it again, the tap of his foot, the slight downturn of his lips, not disgust, not fear, shame. Someone else asked a question, something about garden height restrictions. Lorraine pivoted without missing a beat. But Marcus didn't look up again. After the meeting, most residents scattered quickly. A few avoided my gaze. Some nodded in quiet solidarity. Marcus lingered. He was still at the table, stacking papers into a battered accordion folder when I approached. "Marcus," I said. He looked up slowly. His eyes were bloodshot, not from tears, but from the kind of exhaustion that accumulates when silence becomes its own prison. "I saw your face," I said quietly. "You knew what she did was wrong." He didn't speak. "You've seen it happen before. The fines, the property entries, you record the votes, you type the minutes. You watch his hands trembled, barely perceptible. He pressed them flat against the folder. "Why are you still on this board?" Still no answer. "Because you think if you leave, it gets worse," I said. "Because you believe staying lets you do something, anything, even if it's just keeping a record." His jaw clenched. "Emily's alive because of a backup system I built," I added. "But Lorraine didn't know about that. She just saw something she didn't like and ripped it out. That got him." His mouth opened, then closed. He looked away, down at his pen. "You don't have to speak now," I said, stepping back. "But at some point, you're going to decide whether your silence is protection or complicity." I left him there in the rec room, surrounded by perfectly aligned stacks of rules, and I knew he'd already made the decision. He just hadn't said it out loud yet. By the next morning, the HOA's escalation was official. An envelope arrived, hand-delivered, not mailed. No postage, no signature, just the Sundale Ridge seal stamped across the flap, and a barcode printed beneath my name. Inside, a notice of ongoing non-compliance, now upgraded to level 3. It included a demand for immediate removal of all unapproved devices, a daily fine of $250, and a clause stating that failure to comply would result in a lien filing against my property. They weren't just threatening me now, they were setting the trap. I laid the letter out on the kitchen island next to Emily's glucose monitor and the fetal heart reader. She was still sleeping, restless, pale, one hand resting on her stomach like she was shielding the baby from the world. I'd spent the night watching over her, barely blinking. The whir of the machines, the soft ping of vitals normalizing. Every sound was a lifeline. And now the HOA wanted to remove it all under the pretense of visual contamination. I took a slow breath and walked into my office. The wall monitor flicked on. My security interface displayed 4 video feeds: front yard, driveway, porch, and interior zone 1. All archived, all encrypted, all time-synced to the network clock. I scrolled to the moment Lorraine had entered again, watching it in reverse this time. From the flick of her wrist back to the first step, she took onto my walkway. Her arrogance was routine. This wasn't a woman acting in panic or confusion. It was performance. She knew exactly how many seconds she had. Her walk was efficient. Her removal of the plug was smooth, like she'd done this before, many times. And that's when it clicked. She had done this before, not just to us. I pulled up the compliance logs I'd scraped from the HOA's public website, weekly violation records, property notes, digital summaries for property correction actions. The formatting was sloppy, but the pattern was there. Several homes listed emergency inspection initiated by board over the last 6 months. No signatures, no prior warnings, and always Lorraine's initials logged in the actioned by field. 7 homes, all marked with vague violations: satellite dish adjustment, window tint measurement, attic ventilation review, unauthorized solar prep. 7 entries, no resident signatures, no independent oversight, and no follow-up records. I wrote the list down. I started with the first name, Gina Tolbert, across the main road, 2 cul-de-sacs over. Her violation? Unauthorized structural access to sub-roofline dish. She hadn't spoken much at meetings, but I remembered her, quiet, sharp-eyed, always watching. I knocked just after noon. Gina answered the door with a look that said she wasn't surprised to see someone standing there, but hadn't decided whether it was worth opening up. "I'm not selling anything," I said. "I'm asking about a violation you got." Back in May, she didn't move. "Lorraine Withers, emergency access, claimed you had a satellite dish hidden under your awning." Her jaw tensed. "She walked into my backyard. Said she had a noise complaint. My son's therapy unit was mounted there. He uses sound machines for sensory processing." I nodded. "She didn't even pretend to knock. Just let herself in and took a picture. She unplug anything?" I asked. Gina's eyes flicked up, and for the first time, I saw something underneath the frustration. Fear. "Yeah," she whispered. "The outdoor unit shorted. It overloaded the indoor controller. My son had a meltdown we couldn't stop for 3 hours. And they hadn't said a word to anyone, because HOA intimidation doesn't come with sirens. It comes with paper trails and veiled language and neighbors who are too scared to look up when you pass them. But I wasn't scared. I was documenting. By evening, I had 5 interviews, 5 stories, each different in detail, identical in pattern. Lorraine didn't make mistakes. She made moves. And now I was starting to map the entire network. I laid the documents out in front of me. Timestamps, footage, logs, witness statements. The HOA wanted to bury me in notices and fines. But they forgot one thing. I was still recording. And this time, they weren't just threatening a family. They were exposing themselves. It wasn't just a violation of property rights anymore. It was a health hazard, a pattern, a coordinated campaign. And now, I had proof that Lorraine's actions weren't just arbitrary. They were consistent. That night, I opened a secure call with someone I hadn't spoken to since we built the backup relay for trauma hospitals. Dr. Ashira Levin, a medical compliance advisor who helped design the legal boundaries around at-home care telemetry. She picked up from a dimly lit office, her voice clipped, efficient as ever. "Gavin, you don't call unless something's gone catastrophically wrong." "It has," I said. "I need to know how fast I can get a legal review on a home health monitoring system that was tampered with by a third party. Non-medical, no consent." I sent over the footage while we talked. Within minutes, she was reading aloud from federal ADA and HIPAA adjacency statutes, because what Lorraine had done wasn't just morally bankrupt, it was legally indefensible. "You've got clear cause," Ashira said, scrolling through the frame where Lorraine unplugs the device. "This isn't gray area. It's black letter law. What's the fastest route for oversight?" I asked. "Not a lawsuit. I want external authority. State or federal." She leaned back. "You want it fast and sharp? File a dual complaint. One to your state health oversight board for medical interference, one to the licensing division under elder and dependent adult protections. She interfered with essential care. You've got the timestamps, medical consequence, and intent. That's a full field audit waiting to happen." I sat back in my chair, absorbing the weight of it. For the first time in days, something cracked inside me. Not rage or anxiety, readiness. Ashira paused. "Also, Gavin, that backup system, it saved her." "Yeah," I said quietly. "It wasn't meant to have to." She didn't say anything else, just nodded, and the call ended. I closed the laptop, walked back into the living room where Emily was resting, her monitors steady, quiet now. I brushed my hand against the wooden armrest of her recliner, next to the cable Lorraine had yanked free like it was nothing. The garden light flickered outside, my planter, still standing, still watching. By morning, I was at City Hall. I handed over the complaint forms, notarized and complete, to a woman behind the counter who looked like she'd seen every type of neighborhood feud known to man, until she read the phrase, medical interference resulting in emergency hospitalization. Her face changed. "I'll escalate this today," she said, already picking up the phone. Next, I filed the second complaint online, this one through the Department of Health's Care Environment Integrity Division. Included were a timeline of events, screenshots of HOA violations, the surveillance footage with chain of custody hash verification, and a sworn statement. I didn't embellish. I didn't dramatize. I documented. Because it wasn't about getting revenge, it was about drawing a hard line, and Lorraine Withers had already stepped over it. That afternoon, I returned home to find another envelope taped to our porch. This one wasn't from the HOA. It was from the city clerk's office. Inside, confirmation that an emergency review had been opened on the Sundale Ridge HOA for possible civil and administrative violations tied to unauthorized home entry and medical interference. They were investigating Lorraine, officially. I stood on my porch, holding the letter, and looked across the street. The houses were still, shutters closed, cars and driveways unmoving. But I knew people were watching, and I wanted them to, because this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about everyone Lorraine had threatened, fined, silenced. Everyone who'd watched their loved ones suffer in silence because they feared retaliation disguised as paperwork. Now the silence was cracking, and behind it, sirens. The letter from the city clerk hadn't been on my porch more than an hour before Lorraine struck back. I was on the phone with Emily's nurse reviewing her at-home medication schedule when my inbox pinged with a new violation notice, this time marked urgent board action pending. I opened the file and read it twice, slowly. They were filing for emergency architectural remediation. In plain English, they wanted permission to remove the antenna and monitoring box themselves if I didn't do it by morning. A contractor had already been contacted. The notice even included a clause about HOA protective authority overriding resident objections in matters of visual contamination tied to community health. Community health. They were accusing Emily's medical devices of being a public hazard. The line between policy and punishment wasn't just blurred, it was broken. I called the HOA office. No answer. I walked down to the clubhouse instead, fists clenched, breath tight. The lights were off, but the door wasn't locked. Inside, everything looked staged, perfectly arranged chairs, glass bowls of polished stones, a fake fern tucked in a corner. But I wasn't alone. Marcus Kelt sat at the back table, typing on a laptop, shoulders hunched like a man trying to become invisible. He looked up, startled. Then, something shifted. He didn't close the laptop. He didn't pretend he wasn't working. He just stared at me. "They're escalating," I said, voice low. "I know," he replied. "I got a removal notice." "Less than 24 hours. He nodded. His fingers twitched toward the laptop but stopped. "Lorraine wrote it?" I asked. "She had the language ready before the complaint even hit her desk," he said. "She expected it." That hit harder than I expected. "You're still logging the minutes?" I asked. He nodded again. "Even this?" He hesitated, then turned the screen toward me. A document titled Private Board Notes, HOA Special Session, filled the page. It was dated the night after Emily's hospitalization. She'd held a closed-door meeting without quorum, no votes, just a directive. Eliminate high-risk visual violations before the city arrives. "She knew this was coming," I said. "She's done it before," Marcus replied. "Just not this big. Why are you still helping her?" "I'm not," he said. His voice was hoarse, dry. "I'm helping you. I just haven't figured out how loud yet." We stared at each other for a long time. I didn't ask for the document. I didn't need to. The fact that he'd shown it was enough. For now. Outside, the sky was dimming. The streetlights blinked on, one by one. My porch lights, though, stayed off. I'd disabled them. I wanted the cameras to have clean visuals in the dark. That night, I sat by the window while Emily slept. The machines near her hummed in steady rhythm. No disruptions, no alarms. I stared at the cables Lorraine had tried to remove, now reinforced with locking clips and redundancies. If they came, they'd have to break them. And I'd be waiting, not with fists, not with shouting, but with everything I'd spent years building. I updated the security system firmware, layered new off-site backups, and resynced the footage from the garden monitor to a cloud server with timestamp verification. Every step Lorraine had taken, every door she touched, every rule she rewrote, it was all there. And this time, it wasn't just archived, it was admissible. By midnight, I'd completed the formal evidence package for the city's legal review. Every video clip, every complaint, every incident report from neighbors who had started quietly emailing me after word got out. I didn't name Marcus. I protected him, for now. But I logged his notes, saved the metadata, preserved the integrity. When I shut down the monitor, I sat back and looked around my office. The screens, the cables, the humming of quiet machines. Everything felt like an extension of breath. And suddenly I understood something I hadn't before. Lorraine wasn't just attacking Emily. She was attacking the system I'd built to protect the people I loved. And now that system was awake. I didn't see Marcus again for 3 days. Not at the mailbox clusters, not at the board office, not even in passing on his usual morning walks. It was like he'd vanished into the paperwork he'd spent years quietly chronicling. But then, Thursday came, and with it, the sound of a car idling in front of my house just a little too long. I stepped outside. The air was sharp and dry. Marcus sat behind the wheel of a beige sedan, engine running, eyes staring ahead like he hadn't yet decided whether to knock or drive away. I didn't wave, I didn't walk up, I just waited. He killed the engine and stepped out, holding nothing but a slim manila folder in one hand and a sealed white envelope in the other. "Can we talk?" he said. We stood in the driveway. I didn't invite him in. "She's preparing a narrative," he said, claiming you manipulated the footage, that the plug was already loose, that the system was unstable and the emergency wasn't related to her entry. I said nothing. "She's planning to present it at the emergency session on Monday. Hoping to get a vote of no confidence, filed against your complaint. She's scared good," I said. "She should be." He hesitated, then held out the folder. I kept copies of everything. Things no one else bothered to archive. Email chains, drafts of violation templates. She deletes the originals, edits timestamps. I started keeping unedited backups last year. He handed it over. I didn't reach for it at first. "I wasn't trying to protect her," he said. "I was trying to stop her. Quietly. But it was never enough. A hesitation here. A vote abstained there. It didn't change anything." "You stayed?" I said. He nodded. "And I watched people get steamrolled, watched a neighborhood get smaller and colder and meaner, and I thought maybe being inside meant I could soften the edge of it." His eyes flicked toward the envelope in his other hand. "That's my resignation letter. Effective immediately, I took both." The folder was heavy, dense with years of compliance rot. The envelope was thin, but sealed like something sacred. "She's going to go scorched earth now," Marcus said. "You know that. I'm counting on it." He started to turn back toward his car, then paused. "There's a line in one of those emails," he said without looking at me. "She writes, 'No one reads the bylaws anyway. They just accept the tone.' That stuck with me." He drove off without another word. Inside, I spread the folder's contents across my kitchen table. Printed emails, meeting summaries, scanned handwritten notes. Not copies of minutes, the real minutes. The drafts before Lorraine rewrote them, not just about me, about others. Gina Tolbert, the Harveys, Mr. Gillespie, even the Henry family, who'd filed for ADA exceptions twice and been denied both times without board vote. She'd done it all before, and Marcus had logged it every step of the way. My phone buzzed. A new message from a number I didn't recognize. "Check your front porch." I opened the door. Nothing there, until I looked down. A flash drive, no label, just a plain black stick tucked inside a Ziploc, set next to a folded HOA violation form. I brought it inside and plugged it into my offline machine. Audio, 3 clips, each time stamped. All recorded in what sounded like the rec room. Lorraine's voice unmistakable, giving instructions. telling another board member to ignore the exemption paperwork from the Henrys, discussing how to rotate fines to avoid legal scrutiny, and one where she referred to Emily's equipment as a liability waiting to become an excuse. She knew what it was, and she yanked the cord anyway. I sat back in my chair, let the silence fill the room. Emily was upstairs, asleep, monitors ticking steadily. The garden light pulsed once, catching a breeze. Lorraine was building a case, but now so was I, and mine was made of truth. By morning, I had everything categorized: Marcus's documents, the audio files from the flash drive, and the footage from the garden monitor, all labeled, hashed, and time-sequenced. It wasn't just evidence anymore. It was a case file. I didn't wait. At 9:02 a.m., I walked into the city oversight office with a 2-inch binder and a portable drive in hand. The woman at the front desk blinked when I handed it over. "You're here for the HOA enforcement review?" she asked, glancing at the intake sheet. "I'm not here to review," I said. "I'm here to contribute." Her expression changed the moment she saw the index of exhibits clipped to the front of the binder. She didn't ask questions, just stood and disappeared into the back with the file clutched to her chest like it might detonate. I waited. 10 minutes passed, then 20. At 28 minutes, a door opened and a man in a city badge and gray shirt called my name. "Mr. Miles, would you step in, please?" The room was plain, glass walls, 2 chairs, and a screen already showing freeze frames from my submitted footage. The man introduced himself as Detective Ron Travers, municipal liaison between the city's Housing Oversight Division and law enforcement. He didn't shake hands, just gestured for me to sit. "We reviewed your submission overnight," he said. "Didn't take long to verify most of it. The digital timestamps, the camera angles, the audio files, they're clean." "Unaltered," I nodded. "You said your wife's hospitalization was a direct result of HOA interference. You stand by that?" "I do," I said. "And I have the chain of custody on every device in that monitoring setup." He nodded slowly. "We've already forwarded this to the County Health Compliance Board. They're looking into whether the HOA's actions constituted a breach of medical access law. If they confirm intent and consequence, it elevates to criminal," I asked. "To criminal," he confirmed. "And you've got a second path unfolding. Civil liability for the HOA and any individual board members who acted outside procedural boundaries, which, according to your documentation, includes override entries, falsified meeting minutes, and retaliation against residents." I opened my folder again and slid forward a printed list. 7 names. Residents, violation histories, dates. "She's done this for over a year," I said. "People just didn't know how to fight it. Or they were afraid he skimmed the list, then tapped one name. This one, Gillespie. His son filed an ADA grievance last fall." I nodded. "Ignored by the board." Marcus logged it. "Marcus?" he asked. "Secretary," I said. "Resigned yesterday. He kept unedited records. I'm protecting his name until you have a subpoena. He's willing to talk, but only once it's formal." Travers leaned back, arms crossed. "You've got a case, Mr. Miles. But you already knew that. I do. What do you want from this?" "Accountability," I said. "Not just for me. For the whole street. This place was supposed to be safe, predictable, and instead, we've all been forced to perform normalcy for fear of fines and inspections." He didn't write that down. He didn't need to. "You'll hear from us within the week," he said. I stood. He held up the binder. "We're keeping this." "I have 3 backups," I replied. By the time I stepped back out onto the sidewalk, the sky had changed. Clouds thickened across the ridge. A storm was finally rolling in. Not rain, but pressure. Heavy, electric. Back home, I rechecked the camera feeds. No activity. Emily was still resting. Her vitals, perfect. The equipment, untouched. But not for long. Lorraine had called a closed-door HOA emergency session for the next morning. Her final move before the city could act. A last grasp at control before the board began to collapse under the weight of what we were building. I wasn't going to stop her, not yet. I wanted her to walk into that room with all her arrogance intact. I wanted her to stand behind that table, raise her voice, pass her vote, and do it all while being recorded. Every word synced to the logs I'd already submitted. I wasn't just collecting evidence anymore. I was building a record she couldn't outrun, one that would speak louder than any fine she'd ever written. I spent the night preparing for war, not with anger, with precision. Lorraine's emergency session was scheduled for 9 a.m., sharp. Only board members and officers were permitted to speak. Residents could observe, but not comment. No press, no outside authorities. It was meant to be a sealed performance. Her last chance to rewrite the narrative before the city completed its audit. But this time, I wouldn't just be watching, I'd be logging. I installed a temporary directional mic inside the rec room the night before. Nothing illegal, just a proximity coil fixed inside the ceiling tile, wired through a maintenance vent I had mapped years earlier when I offered to help the HOA upgrade their security feed. They rejected the offer, of course, said it wasn't aesthetic, so I left the draft schematics untouched, but I kept a copy. At 6 a.m., I woke early, checked the live relay from the planter hub, then walked to the rec center under the cover of morning fog. It was quiet, only a few joggers passed, their breath steaming in the cool air. I keyed open the access hatch behind the landscaping wall and pulled the second relay cable through. By 7:30, I had full audio sync. By 8 o'clock, I'd tuned the voice filter. And by 8:45, I was parked across the street in my truck, sipping cold coffee while the HOA board filtered into the building like actors arriving for dress rehearsal. Lorraine came last, pearl earrings, navy suit. Her hair pulled back so tight it looked shellacked. She didn't smile, she didn't wave. She just entered, clipboard in hand, the queen of a collapsing kingdom. The feed crackled to life in my earpiece. "Let's begin," she said. First on the agenda, narrative control. No one objected. She laid it out like a prosecutor. Emily's equipment was unverified, the footage I'd submitted selectively edited, and the medical event coincidental. She passed around new printouts of a statement she intended to release publicly, one that claimed I had leveraged an emotional incident to destabilize community leadership. The others said nothing. Some nodded, some didn't look up at all. "I recommend we preemptively vote on a censure," Lorraine continued. "We can frame it as a procedural action tied to unauthorized surveillance. That will delegitimize any further digital submissions until legal review is complete." "Who approves the motion?" she asked. Silence. Then, quietly, a voice spoke. "I object." It was Marcus. I didn't even know he was there. But the voice, low, strained, steady, cut through the audio like a crack of thunder. "This isn't a vote," he said. "It's a cover-up." "Mr. Kelt," Lorraine said sharply, "you resigned." "I rescinded my resignation this morning," he replied. "Filed it with the board chair and the city compliance office. As of 8:15, I'm still listed on record." "You don't have standing to." "I do. Because I have minutes from the last 3 sessions you illegally convened. And I have audio of you instructing board members to falsify review procedures." "You're bluffing." "No," he said. "I'm submitting them to the city this afternoon." The room shifted, papers shuffled, someone cleared their throat. Lorraine paused, then changed course. "Second motion," she said. "Emergency approval to remove all external monitoring devices from non-compliant properties within 72 hours. Someone murmured a second. She forced the vote. 5 in favor, 2 against, 1 abstention. Motion passed, but I didn't flinch. I didn't need to stop the vote. I just needed it on record. By 10 a.m., I had the entire session recorded, transcribed, and backed up. Marcus's objection, Lorraine's directives, the motion results, everything. And this time, I didn't wait for someone else to act. I drafted the email to Detective Travers myself. Subject line: confirmed retaliatory action. HOA internal session recording. Attached: audio file, log index, vote record, and 3 new resident affidavits from victims who had come forward in the last 48 hours. As I hit send, I looked up. Emily was on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, sipping ginger tea. Her color had returned. Her eyes were sharp again. I joined her. "They tried again?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. But this time, they left their fingerprints. She nodded, reached for my hand. We sat in silence, waiting. Because now, the next move didn't belong to me. It belonged to the city. I got the call just after sunrise. "This is Detective Travers." The city. Review board has fast-tracked an evidentiary session for tomorrow morning. Public venue. HOA board is required to appear. I didn't ask if Lorraine knew yet. She'd find out soon enough. By noon, the notice had been posted at the community bulletin board. City review. Session, all residents invited. Location, Sundale Ridge. Community auditorium. Time, 10 a.m. Subject, HOA procedural review and resident complaints. That's when things started to shift, small but noticeable. The Henrys came out onto their front lawn for the first time in weeks, standing near the hydrangeas Lorraine once fined them for planting. Mr. Gillespie moved his weather station back into place. Gina Tolbert opened her shutters. It was like the neighborhood was stretching after a long, silent sleep. I spent the rest of the day preparing, not just backups, redundancies, 3 flash drives, 1 printed transcript, cloud copy, encrypted server mirror. I walked through every clip, every document. I rehearsed answers to questions that might come up. My goal wasn't to embarrass Lorraine. It was to remove her, systematically, publicly, permanently. Emily watched from the couch while I arranged the materials. "You're sure about this?" she asked. I was sure the minute she touched the monitor. "Then finish it." She didn't need to say more. She hadn't, since the night it happened. Not because she was afraid, because she trusted me to handle it. That night, just before I shut down my system, I caught something strange on the garden cam, a figure at the bulletin board, not Lorraine, Marcus. He was pinning something up beneath the city notice. I zoomed in. "To all residents, what happens tomorrow affects us all," typed, signed, posted in his name. He was taking a stand, not from the shadows this time, and that changed everything. Morning came fast. The community auditorium, usually reserved for fundraisers and yoga classes, was half full by 9:40. By 10, every seat was taken. Lorraine entered through the side door with 2 board members in tow. She didn't speak, just walked to the front table and arranged her folder like none of this surprised her. But her face told a different story, tight around the eyes, too much powder on her cheekbones, and that look, the one bullies wear when they realize the doors are locked and the cameras are rolling. I took my seat in the 3rd row, not in front, not in back, right where I could see everything and be seen by everyone. A city official stepped up to the microphone. "This session is now in progress. We are here today to address multiple resident complaints regarding procedural misconduct and health safety interference within the Sundale Ridge HOA." He turned to Lorraine. "Board President Withers, you've been served with an official inquiry. You may respond or defer, but be advised, everything here is under formal record." She stood, smiled politely, and began to speak. Polished, smooth, controlled. Her voice wrapped around phrases like misunderstanding, community integrity, and intent to cooperate. She didn't deny the events. She simply reframed them. Until they played the audio. Detective Travers stepped forward, inserted the flash drive I'd provided, and pressed play. Her voice, word for word. "No one reads the bylaws anyway. They just accept the tone, a liability waiting to become an excuse. Rotate the fines. If they push back, escalate quietly." The room didn't gasp, it exhaled. People leaned back in their chairs. Some shook their heads, some nodded, slow and heavy. Lorraine didn't move. She just stared forward, lips slightly parted. And then Marcus stood. "I logged those meetings," he said. "I filed dissenting opinions that were deleted. I kept every draft she rewrote, and I'm prepared to testify under oath." The city official nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Kelt. That won't be necessary today, but your statement is noted for the public record." Lorraine turned toward him, stunned. For once, she had no words, and neither did the board, because they knew what was coming next. This wasn't a complaint anymore. It was a reckoning. The silence after Marcus spoke wasn't uncomfortable. It was final. The kind of silence that settles not because people don't care, but because everything that needed to be said had already been proven. The city official adjusted his mic and glanced toward Detective Travers. "With confirmation of submitted evidence, public testimony, and recorded directives made in violation of civil residential rights, the HOA Board of Sundale Ridge is now subject to administrative review and formal suspension of authority pending full legal outcome." It was quiet. Then someone clapped, just one. It came from the back row, a teenager, barely 17, wearing earbuds and a hoodie, probably dragged there by his parents. but the sound was sharp, real, and then it spread. A few more hands, then more. Not loud, not explosive, but steady. Lorraine didn't stand, she didn't object. She just sat frozen behind her folder, her lips thin and trembling. The same hands she used to wave off complaints now trembled as she reached for her water glass. It tipped. The water spilled across her documents. She jerked back, but no one helped her. The city official cleared his throat. We will now be opening the floor for resident statements. These will be on record, but not responded to at this time. You may speak or submit written testimony after the session hands went up. The Henrys spoke first, describing the double rejection of their disability request. Then Mrs. Trejo, describing how her planters were forcibly removed by a contracted landscaper while she was in hospice care. Even Mr. Gillespie, who'd lived in the neighborhood for 27 years, stepped to the mic with slow, deliberate steps and recited a list of violations Lorraine had issued against. His rain barrel and his granddaughter's sidewalk chalk. Every single one of them ended with the same phrase. And I was afraid to speak until now. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The footage had spoken. The transcript had spoken. Marcus had spoken. And the neighborhood had finally found its voice. At the end of the resident session, the city clerk announced the decision. Effective immediately, all Sundale Ridge HOA board activities are suspended. A temporary administrative liaison will be appointed until a formal election process can be conducted under external oversight. Any actions taken during the ongoing investigation will be voidable upon review. Further legal consequences are pending. Lorraine stood. Her face was drained of color. She looked not at the audience, not at the board, not at the officials. She looked at me. For the first time, without malice. Only fear. But I didn't return it. I just watched as she walked out of the auditorium, her papers damp and folded, her legacy dripping through her fingers like the water she couldn't control. The board followed, slow and disjointed, like an animal with its head cut off and its legs still twitching. Marcus stayed behind. He came to my side after the crowd thinned. You won, he said, voice low. No, I said. The system worked. He gave a quiet nod. You think it'll hold? I think enough people saw the truth, and I think that's more powerful than any fine she ever issued. He looked around the room, the empty chairs, the people still gathered in quiet conversations, neighbors who hadn't spoken to each other in months, now sharing stories, building something new from the wreckage. And then he smiled, just slightly. Do you know what today is? He asked. I shook my head. 1 year to the day since Lorraine motioned to remove the flag from the community circle, said it was too visually divisive. I blinked. I didn't know that. Most people don't, he said, but she lost that vote. Quietly. It was the only one she ever lost. He paused. Until today. Outside, the sky had turned overcast, not stormy, just soft, blanketed gray. A stillness in the air that didn't feel tense anymore. It felt calm, relieved. And behind us, residents were already pulling down the old violation posters from the bulletin board, one by one, until only the city notice remained. The garden looked different now, not because the flowers had changed. They hadn't. The planter still held its quiet shape, solar panel humming, petals swaying under the weight of early morning dew. But something beneath it had shifted. People paused when they walked by. They didn't look at it like a violation anymore. They looked at it like a witness. It had seen everything, captured everything. And in the end, it spoke louder than any board president ever could. The temporary city-appointed liaison arrived that weekend, a former housing mediator, named Carla Weiss, mid-50s, sharp eyes, soft voice. She didn't come with policies or ultimatums. She came with a notebook and a folding chair. She held meetings in driveways. She asked residents what they needed, not what they were violating. The HOA sign that used to hang over the entrance to the clubhouse was taken down Monday morning. Not stolen, not vandalized, just removed. No one asked where it went. Emily sat with me on the porch that afternoon. Her hand rested on her belly, steady now, strong. The machines were quieter lately, less frantic, more steady. Like the air around us had finally stopped holding its breath. You did it, she said. We did, I replied. She looked at the planter. I was so afraid that night. When the monitor went dark, I thought, I know, I said. Me too. We sat in silence, the kind that doesn't ache anymore, just fills. Across the street, kids chalked up the sidewalk with neon suns and purple stick figures. A dog barked 2 houses down. Someone fired up a barbecue early. It felt like a neighborhood again. Marcus came by just after 3. He didn't say much, just handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, motion to appoint Gavin Miles to Interim Safety and Technology Advisory Committee. Below it, 22 signatures, more than 2/3 of the homeowners. They want you on the ballot, Marcus said. I looked at him. I'm not interested in power, I said. That's what caused this in the first place. You wouldn't be there for power, he replied. You'd be there for prevention. I didn't answer him right away, just folded the paper, slid it into my pocket. I'll think about it, he nodded. We stood there for a while, watching as Gina Tolbert planted a row of tomato vines along her fence. No one stopped her, no one warned her. No violation forms fluttered in the breeze, just neighbors, rebuilding. In the end, Lorraine Withers resigned, not just from the board, but from the neighborhood. Word was, she sold her house within a week of the city's official suspension. Her name disappeared from the HOA letterhead. Her fines were overturned, her authority dissolved, but her legacy? That would stay. Not as fear, as warning. Because this community remembered now. It remembered what silence could cost, and what truth could restore. So, here we are, back in the garden, back where it started. A monitor and a planter, a mother in a chair, a husband who didn't yell, didn't threaten, didn't break the rules, but knew every one of them well enough to shatter the illusion they were built on. If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now. Share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from. Because someone out there needs to know they're not alone, and someone else needs to know they're being watched.